Hi guys, and welcome back. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to create a graphic user interface calculator. Unlike the text-based calculator we built previously, this will be a graphic interface calculator where you can insert numbers using your mouse. So let's get to it. The first thing I'm going to do is create a new file, and I am going to save as. So I'm going to give my file a name, and I will save it as graphic calculator. Then I'll say .py for the Python extension. Now the first thing I'll do is import a library called Tkinter. Now this is a library that is responsible for all the graphics that we will be using today. We are going to type. So from this library Tkinter, we are going to import everything. This is import all, the star. So that way we have access to all its facilities. And the next thing I'm going to do is I am going to create a window instance. Basically, I am calling out a window to appear every time I run the code. And we do that by defining a variable first. And you call this tk function. This will bring out a window. The variable will be called var, but I'm going to create one that's called window so that it's a little bit more easier to read and understand. So I'll call it window. So this can be any name. This is the function that calls out that window. We're also going to write another statement that will keep the program in a loop. So it's going to keep our window on our screen until we press to exit. So this will also take the same name of our parent window and then dot main loop. So if I go ahead and run this program, you will see that a window is created, right? And this window is gonna stay there until we exit. This is the window, and right now you can see the title is TK. So we can go ahead and give it our own title, right? And you do that by again calling the parent window, and then you say dot title, and you give it a title by simply putting a string inside the brackets, and we're going to call it calculator. Now when I run it again, you'll see it will have taken that name, but anyway, you can see I have the name calculator shows, so we know this is a calculator window. We're going to continue with the rest of the code. I will now display the entry widget. Now the entry widget will act as our screen, or as our calculator screen. This is a widget where you enter information. It's a little border where it allows you to enter information. The standard code for that widget is you also create a variable, and the function is entry. The parameters are, right, parent and options. So these are the parameters. Options. So I am going to go ahead and call my variable display, right? Now what is the parent? The parent is the name of your window, the variable name you give to your window. So this is what you call the parent window here, right? So you will call it window, right? Now what are the options? Well, there are a couple of options. I selected the ones that I needed for my entry widget. There are multiple, but you don't really need all of them necessarily. So I will go ahead and add the ones that were crucial to my program. And those ones are the following. I'm just simply going to paste them here. So as you can see, okay, I'll remove this. We're going to first focus on these ones. These are all the options, right? This is outside our, I can take it out for now. Let me just delete it so that it doesn't confuse you. So we say this is our variable. This is a standard function. You have to write it as it is. Now the window, it depends on what you called your variable up here when you created the window instance. So this is the instance name. So then the font is the options. So here, this is where you put the font style, the type that you want. Again, I'm just going to copy and paste the stuff that I've already written before. So as you can see, I've pasted the following. So it's Century Gothic. This is just a font style. This is the character size, and this is the bold to just give it an extra thickness, right? Now the text variable, this is the most interesting, I think, of this line here, is that the text variable, this is the information that will be displayed in that entry gadget. So that's the information you're typing with the keyboard. And this is a standard parameter. So you are going to give it a variable you will use to contain that information you typed in. So I'm going to make my variable text input. Since this is a variable, we have to define it outside. We have to define it somewhere else on this program. So I am going to come here and define it and say text input equals to, now I'm going to call another function which is called string variable. You have to type it as it is. It's case sensitive, right? So the S and the V must be capital letters. This is also a built-in function. So this basically is just defining this function to say this function is a string variable. So whatever you put in here will be a string, and that string will then be sitting here, and it's going to be displayed on our entry widget. Now the following or parameter, right, it's the BD, which is just the border size. You can make it 10, you can make it 20, depends on what style you're going for. So it's just for styling. Same thing with relief. There is something called flat, right? This is just the type of screen you will have. Your display will be flat, and I like the one called ridge, right? It gives a nice edge that looks a little bit sharp like a ridge. This is just about styling. Now this is a background color, so I'm going to make it gray. You can make it any other color you want. I'm going to make it gray. Now justify, this tells you the position where you want your input. As you have noticed, most calculators, the numbers always sit on the left hand side, right? On the right hand side. There's always a 0 on the right hand side. As you type, then the numbers sort of shift to the left. So the orientation should be left at first, or right, sorry. They should be right at first, right? So you type numbers, you punch them in from the right and you shift them to the left. So, but this will all make sense when I call that widget. And there's another function you should call, which is grid. This is what draws the widget. So if I just go ahead and run this code, there it is, it calls the grid. But without this, if I take this out and I run it, you can see it's plain. But if I put back the grid, if I run again, we get that screen. And as you can see, if I start typing, you can see numbers are being entered. We are going to enter a grid made of columns and rows, right? Let's get building. But remember, we're going to have 4 vertical columns, and that's important because I'm about to do something here next, and you'll see in a bit what I'm about to do. A row, say row 0, column 0. This is how normally you would give a grid its position, right? But in this case, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to go ahead and say column span and say 4. What this means is that when I run my code, this entry widget takes up 4 columns. So there are invisible columns. So it breaks this whole width into 4 columns. We are going to create a button widget. Again, let's first look at the standard code, right? Just a basic code of that. It's a variable and then the button function, right? And then it will also have the same thing, parent and options. What is the variable? We decide. We give it any variable we want. I'll make it easier for myself. I'll say button. Since we're going to have about 16 buttons, so each button should have a different name. So the first button, I want to create button 7. This is the button that will be sitting right here. It's going to be the first button on the top left corner. What will be the parent? The parent is again the same. It's the window in question. Window. Okay, the options, I'm just going to simply copy the options that I've already tailor-made for my button. There are more parameters to add to your styling, but these are the ones that are relevant for this button. The first option would be the paired X. So this is just to increase the size of the button in the X plane, right? I'm just going to give it a 16, and then the BD is the border size. It's going to be an 8. And then the FG is the color of the font. This button is going to be white or gray, so I want the 7 to be written in black, so I'm going to give it a black. This is the styling of the font. Again, I'm just going to copy the style that I've already created. I'm just going to paste it all in there. As you can see, this time around I chose Arial, unlike the last time, and then I'll still make it the same size and the bold. Now the text, this is what you want written on the button. We want to have the number 7 on the button, so this is what will be written on that button. This is the most interesting part of this button widget. For now, let me delete this command, right? Because I want to first display the button so you see what's going on. So we're going to go ahead and play or run the code. As you can see, oh yes, my button is not showing and I know why. So let's draw the grid, and then give it, we want it to be on the second row because the first row is occupied by our screen, but it should still be on the first column. Let's run the code and you see what I mean by that. As you can see, it has 7. So if I had given it the row 0, it will be sitting up here, or maybe I can just quickly show you. You see, it sits on top of my screen because they are sharing the same row, so you need to put it on its own row. I'm going to go ahead and add the command parameter. Now what this does is each time you press the button, the command should execute a function. We're going to define what that function is. So now we are going to define the function. I want my function to be button press, right? And inside it I will put in data, and it's gonna be a 7, right? So this is the string that I put in myself. So every time I press the button, it's gonna go to this command. Remember, we have to have a comma here to separate this from the rest of the parameters, and then it's gonna call this function button press. So it means now we have to start creating the function define. So it's diff for define, button press, and then we want to have an argument which will represent this data, and that argument I choose key. I am going to create a new variable, right? That variable will hold my data. So I'm going to call that variable character. I need to make it a global variable, so I need to call it global. Or let me put it here, say character, right? So at the moment it has no data in it. It holds strings. This is my container that holds strings. When you look at functions, look at them as a separate code from your main program, because the main program starts here. Yeah, so look at functions as some sort of like sub codes, sub programming. They're not, right? Because you have to call the function, you have to leave your current main loop and go to the function, execute the function, and come back to the loop, right? So for you to access this character, you have to introduce it as a global character. Otherwise, your function won't know about this character. It's defined here, yes, but here it wouldn't know about it if you don't first define it. So that's why we are defining it as a global, because it's part of the main code, but we're going to need it in this sub code. Think of, functions as subcodes, or a separate code, so to speak. So they are linked by this calling process here. You call it and then you then go access it. So now what we are going to do is, basically what this does is, every time we press a key, we want that key, right? For instance, if we press 7, we want the 7 to sit inside our character. So we are going to go ahead and say character, right, is equals to, you would think we will write character is equals to key, which wouldn't be wrong. However, remember that if you're pressing multiple keys, let's say we press 7 twice, so we want to enter the number 77. If you press 7, 7 will sit in the here, and then it will be entered into the character. So character container will hold 7, and you press the second 7, again the 7 comes here and then it sits inside here, therefore it will update your character by 7. So you will not have 77, but you'll just have 7. So it will keep updating the thing by 7, sort of overwriting. It will overwrite the previous data. So you can never type more than one character, because every time you type a 7, it will just overwrite the one before. So overwrites, sorry, not overwriter. It will overwrite. So to avoid overwriting, you need to do the following. You say character plus, right? Character plus key. So now what happens is, if you have 7 for the first time, the 7 will sit here and this will be 0, okay? So because this is empty, like I said, it's initially it's empty. So you're gonna say 7 will sit here, then 7 will sit here, then you'll say character is equals to nothing, because there's nothing here, plus that 7. So now you have nothing plus the 7. But I want you also to note one thing. We are adding strings here. We are not adding numbers. We are adding strings. This could have been a letter like D, or I mean a letter D or an E, right? These are strings. Even though it's a number, but it's a we treat it as strings because these are strings. All of these are strings at the moment. So you have a 0 string here and a 7 as a string here. So now you've got, well, you got nothing. It's not even a 0, because to say it's a 0, I'll be lying. It's a nothing. There's nothing there. And then you have a 7 here. So what will character be? It will be updated to a 7. So when you enter 7 for the second time, there will be 7 here. There will be 7 here, but remember the character is 7 already, so there'll be another 7 here. So the two 7s together, they will now give you, so you'll have 2 7s, right? So you'll have 2 7s, so they'll give you 77. Now if you add the third 7, now character has 2 7s now, right? Character has 2 7s. You add a key, which is this, right? Which is a 7. So it's gonna add another 7 here. Now you got 2 7s here, 1 7 here, so you got 2 7s here. Sorry, you got 2 7s there, 1 7 here and there. So now you're gonna keep writing a string of 7s. It's just gonna be 1 7 after the other. So you create 7 7 7 7 7 7 7, just like you would with your calculator app here on Microsoft, right? If you were to type 7, the first 7 is there, second 7, third 7, 7 7 7 7 7. So that's what you're doing here. You are saying character plus key. You keep adding to that character, to that string. You keep adding a digit. So if you press 8, the same thing will happen. There will be an 8 here, and then here you already have 3 7s. So that string will be amended by 7. So this is not adding. It's actually called. It's not adding. It's called to concatenate. The jury's out on that one. Oh my god. Right, it's not adding, it's called to concatenate. That's what they call it, because it's strings and not numbers, right? That's why we concatenate. We don't add, right? So you just keep amending the previous string by the new character. That's what you're doing. So this will be the function. When you finally decided that you have your entry, and then when you press enter, then this text will be the text that gets displayed on your entry, and the function that does that is this one, right? So you're going to call this text input. So now you're going to say text, so text input is equals to, oh sorry, text input, you set it, right? You set it with a value of character, right? You are setting the string, because remember it's a string, right? It was empty before, so now you are setting it with a value. Oh sorry, we are setting it with a value of character, right? And remember, character, last time we typed it was 7778, right? That was our character, right? That was our character. It was 778. So this 778 will sit in this input, I mean text input, and it's going to be displayed on the entry window, right? So that's what this does. However, let's first run this code, right? Okay, there's a 7 there. I don't know where it's coming from. I know where it's coming from. I know where the 7 is coming from. See, but when I press the 7, nothing happens. Nothing happens when I press a 7. The 7 sit there though. We see a 7 there. The reason we see a 7 there is because there is information there. There's a 7. The 7 sits in the key. The key is amended to the empty character variable. Now the variable is updated with a 7. So we have a 7 sitting in there, right? However, when we press the button, nothing happens. So we need something called, let me type it here. We need something called lambda, right? And we achieve that by saying command is equals to lambda, and then we put in the colon there, right? This will ensure that when we press our button, the information is executed every time, right? So let's play that. So now as I press 7, you can see the information is being added. So I'm just going to go ahead and repeat this process for all 9 buttons. For now, let me just quickly copy and paste, because the rest is just copy and paste it. So we go through this one together. So this is going to be button 8, right? We agree that the next button will be button 8. Everything else will remain the same. The styling is the same. We also need to change the column. That's right, we're changing the column because we want it to move it to the second column, the one next to it. So if I play or run this code, you'll see we got 2 7s, but this is button 8, right? This is button 8, just that it still has the information of button 7. The only reason is because we have not changed this information here, right? And also this one here. Now as you can see, we have 8 and we can type 8. Now and the last button will be the addition button. So I'm going to call it the plus, right? For the addition, I'm going to call this a plus button, and then I'm going to give it a plus sign because that's what I want to print on that one. Oh, by the way, I need to change the coordinates. So this one will be on row 3, which is a 2, and this will be on row 4, not row, column, my bad, column, right? So we start from 0 to 3, but these are actually 4 columns. You can see now they are stacked a little bit nicer, even though the plus button seems to be a little bit overlapping over here. If you can see, it tends to overlap. So if I want to, I can trim it by reducing the width on the x-axis. So let's make it maybe 14. Let's see how it looks. See, it's much better now. I think 13 will do. Or let me just make it 12. Let me make it 12 there. Let me just make it 12. I just wanted to show you and go through the whole first row by ourselves. So the rest will just be copy and paste of the same thing. So I'm just going to quickly copy what I've done earlier by myself. And there are certain things that, so I'm going to copy this. These are pretty much the same. These are pretty much obvious and they're the same. Things get a little bit interesting when we do the equal. This one over here, as you can see, I have a slightly different function that I run. The rest use the same button press function, but this one uses a different function called button compute. There is a reason why I did that. But let's first see what our calculator looks like thus far, right? I have all these buttons and all of them you can enter the digits. I'm missing what will be my cancel button here, okay? I left that on purpose because I wanted us to go into more detail with it. Now to add a cancel button, I'm going to type in cancel, then I'll call the button function. So now I'm going to have to type in the capital letter C for cancel. And maybe I need to make it red, right? I will also change the function because I don't want to call the same function. And I'm going to call this function a cancel function, right? write a cancel function. You this extra bracket over there. This has to be row 4, column 0. Why do I want this to cancel? Is so that when I have pressed a key, when I press cancel, I want it to go to 0, right? When I press cancel, okay, you can see it's showing me an error because I have not yet defined my function yet. So when it calls that function, it doesn't see it, it's not defined. But that is the whole point of this. I should get a reset to 0. So you're not going to achieve that by using this button press function over here, right? We need to create a function that will deal with the canceling or the resetting of the screen. So that function will be def, and then we're going to call the same name as this one over here. So we're just going to copy this. So it's button cancel. That's the name of the function we are going to create, and we say paste, simply paste. So it's button cancel, and I don't think I need an argument. Yeah, there's no need for an argument. So I'm going to take out this 0 over here. There's no need for an argument in this case. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to introduce my global variable once more. Global variable is character, and again I'm going to say every time we hit the cancel button, character has to become 0 regardless of what we have here, whether it's 778. Once we hit the cancel button, character should now have a new data of 0. That's what we mean by this. So this is what that means. That is what this means. Let me just delete this. Cause confusion later. Anyway, now we also need to set this text inputs. So we need to set it like we did here. So we're gonna come down here and say text input dot set. So the text input will now take the value of the character, which is 0. Yes, because now the character is 0, so the screen is going to display a 0. I forgot to add, I always forget this column. It's a bad habit of mine. See, so now if you type 5 4 blah 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 and press cancel, you get a 0. 3 this and that, you get a 0, right? So the cancel button, we are happy with it. Okay, let me see something. So 2 4 5 cancel, and 3. See, but now there's an issue. Do you see that one? Did you catch it? Look again. 5 6 7 or 5 6 4. You see the problem? There is a 0 now in front, and you know why that is? It's because we have set our character to have a string of 0 in it, which is fine immediately after refreshing, but it poses a problem when you start entering new keys, and that's because character will keep its original 0. So in this case, character is going to keep its original 0, right? That original 0 in there, which was set here. But the new key, we concatenate. Let's say the new key is 2, right? The new key is 2. So now what we see displayed is 02. So we need to make sure that we kill this 0. But if we kill this 0, right, all that we have is an empty screen. So let's run the program again. So if I do 2 4 this and I cancel, the screen is just dead. We expect to see a 0 there, right? But when you cancel, everything goes away. It will still work because now you have fresh new numbers without a 0 leading, right? So how do we achieve that? So the way that I went about it is to put back the 0 there, and then come here, copy, come here and put in a empty space. So in other words, character refreshes to 0, we display the 0, but behind the scenes we kill off the 0. So now you have 0. So when you add a 2 later on, you are going to have a character which has nothing in it, an empty space because of this here, and that new 2 will be updated to that character, and now we're gonna have a nice 2 displayed without a leading 0 in front of it. So that's how I went about it. There could be other ways. There's more than one way to skin a cat. So let's run it again and see. As you can see, we have 2, 4, cancel, and there we go. The 0 stays. But now if I type a number, what will happen? See, it's a fresh number, cancel. Fresh number, cancel. No 0, no nothing. It's fresh. It's a new number. So all I did, I just named the variable means for minus, mult for multiply, and div d for divide, right? But it's the same thing, because with the minus, all I did was I changed the sign that will be displayed on the button itself, and I also changed the sign that will be introduced to the function here, so that character will come here. So basically how it works is that if you press the key 1, the first character will be 1, then the second character is plus, right? And the third character would be another number, let's say 2, right? So you have got these 3 characters that you entered. So if you press 1, you have the first character sitting here, and then it will sit in the character. The second character will be amended to the first character, and then they will be like this. So now you have 1 plus the new character, which is 2. So when you press the equal button, the equal sign, it should compute this. But these are strings. How can we compute strings? How do you add a string to a string? Because every time you use a plus, it's not adding numbers. It just keeps adding strings like this. So if you say 1 plus 2, all it does is just keeps adding, strings. It's like it just keeps typing something like that. It's not actually doing the addition. So how do we add the strings, right? Because like I said, we concatenate, right? We are not adding. So now how do you add strings? So now we go to create a new function for the equal button, which is this one over here. I've created an equal button. So I just type in EQLL. I gave it an equal sign, and I gave it a function called button compute. It has to compute. It has to give us the results. So we're going to define that button over here. So I'm just going to copy this. So we're going to define the function semicolon, and then again I'm gonna introduce the global variable character. Have to go ahead and use a function called evaluate, right? What this does is it evaluates the string. It evaluates strings. So in other words, if your string is 2 plus 2 like this, in a string form, these are just considered characters. But this evaluate can break this into a number, this into a plus sign, and this into a number. So then it's like, oh, this is actually 2 plus 2. So in other words, if you had to evaluate d plus 2, it will give you an error because these are not the same thing. When you've got two numbers, it will see it as a math equation, so to speak, a mathematical expression. So the argument of an eval function is a string. Yes, this is a string. If the string represents an expression, eval evaluates the expression. So this will evaluate the expression. So in other words, you can enter 77, right, plus 7, right? This will sit here in the character, right, because it sits here. So it will come here, and then now you want to evaluate it. So you have to come and throw it in here. So you throw the whole character in there. However, we have to assign it to something. We can't just evaluate it and leave it there. So we assign it to what? Text input dot set. So we are setting our text input, which is what we always display, right, with that answer, because this thing returns an answer. Once it evaluates, it returns an answer. In this case, the answer will be 777. So this thing will return 777, and then the text input will be set by that value, and it's going to display 777. So let's see if this has taken effect. Let me run this calculator once more. Okay, 4 plus 5 is 9. I cancel. or 10 or 100 divided by 20. Yeah, 120 is 5. Oh, by the way, division will always return a float because division caters for fractions. In case you have something like 1 divided by 2, right? It's going to be a fraction. So that's why it gives you a decimal point. That's why it does that. So that's it, folks. This is the simple graphic calculator code. However, this calculator is not perfect. As you can see, if I run something like 4 plus 5 and I say equals to, if I don't cancel out, if I continue typing, it's going to add my number to this 9, not add it, but rather it's going to concatenate it. Oh, by the way, no, it doesn't even concatenate it to the 9. It concatenates it to the previous expression. So now it says 4 plus 52, but that's not what I was trying to get at. See, so if I say minus, see, now it's doing some crazy things. There are still a lot of issues with this calculator, but for the basics, it can do everything as long as you use the cancel key every time you finish an expression. In fact, I'm going to do a part 2 to this calculator where I start to deal with issues like that. I hope you join me in that video, and thank you for watching, and please subscribe or like the video, and have a good day. Thank you.